Hi everybody, welcome to another video from Junkyard Restoration. Today we're going to do something a little bit different, seeing as how my Cherokee is at a point where we can't really do anything with it at this time. So we're going to talk about how to buy junky cars or used cars, things that you could buy and drive every single day and get a decent deal on. And this is going to be not a comprehensive list, but a nice little checklist that you could go through if you're thinking about buying a used car on Facebook Marketplace or Craigslist or any of those kind of places. And this can give you a nice little list of things to go through and to know if it's a pretty decent car. I'm no expert by any means. I don't own a dealership, run a dealership, or sell cars for profit. But as you can see by my list behind me, I have owned a fair amount of cars. So I have some experience with this. Almost everything I bought came from Craigslist or Facebook Marketplace and things like that. So without any further ado, let's see what we can do. Okay, so here's how this video is going to work. We're going to have 3 cars of 3 different values, pretty much fresh from Craigslist and Facebook Marketplace and OfferUp, all those places, right? Some of these cars are higher value, some of them are lower value. We're going to go through each one, talk about some things you should look for, especially on lower value cars, and try to figure out which one is the best deal. Now, all these cars were on the market in real life. Little disclaimer, have bought all of these cars. So I obviously didn't choose a bad car off the bat, except for one, which will let you figure out which one that's going to be, which I bought sight unseen at auction, which is always a gamble. You shouldn't really do it if you don't know that much about cars, you're just looking for reliable transportation, but we'll get into that as well. So a couple of things I'd like to talk to right away, right? Know what kind of car you want. Most people that ask me, well, I have $5,000, I need to buy a car, usually are looking for something that's kind of reliable, inexpensive to keep running, inexpensive to insure, and easy to get your hands on, like parts and stuff like that. Usually I say the Toyota Corolla, but the Toyota Corolla these days is getting to be kind of an expensive car. So we're going to look at a couple of options you could buy other than a Toyota Corolla, which gives you all of the things a Toyota Corolla can do for the most part, but just doesn't have the Toyota Corolla name. Now that you've established a couple of cars you want to look at, a couple of different options, right? So let's say, take the same scenario. Toyota Corolla. You could look at Honda Civics. You could look at other types of cars in that thing, like maybe a Chevy Cobalt if you're on the lower end of the budget spectrum, right? So those are a couple cars that you could go look at. Now, the first thing you should do is go and look up at things to look for when you buy those specific models. So a video like this may not help you very much. You need to know if those cars have certain problems with transmissions. You need to know if those cars have certain suspension issues. Maybe they rust really easily. Maybe there's a lot of recalls on them. Maybe they always seem just fine until you buy them and 20,000 miles later, they always develop an engine knock. Something. You need to have that kind of background information. Know a little bit. You don't have to know everything. You don't have to be an expert, but know a little bit about the car that you're going to go see. Now, we talk about the Carfax, right? Carfax, all those things. Getting a vehicle history report. I don't always recommend getting a vehicle history report because they do cost money and not everybody has the luxury of being able to just throw some money at a Carfax. They are relatively inexpensive, but still something to be considered. Now, if the car has a questionable look to it, it looks a little sketchy, maybe the seller isn't really wanting to share the VIN with you, things like that, you should have your feelers up a little bit. Be a little bit suspicious of what's going on there. The seller should have no problem, especially in the state of California, with reviewing with you the VIN number of the car and the license plate. Those 2 pieces of information you can use to go on the California DMV website and see if the car has any back fees. In this state, if you don't pay your registration and you don't put the car on non-operational status, your car will accrue back fees, the registration that it would have been paid to the state if the car was still on the road. Now, for a new owner or the current owner to get that car back on the road legally, those back fees have to be paid. Now, some owners will be straight up and say, oh, it has $800 in back fees or whatever, and some owners will not. Having the VIN number, or at least the last 5 digits, and the license plate is all you need to figure out that information. Now, many states, pretty much all the rest of them, don't have this back fees business to worry about. So getting the VIN from them isn't as important, especially if you're looking at an older vehicle. Now, if the price seems too good to be true, or it just seems like, dang, I think that car is worth $8,000 and they're selling it for $4,000. These are scams most of the time. Now, very rare in a blue moon, you can find that guy who's leaving the country and he's got to get this car out of his garage before Thursday because he's just got to get rid of it. It happens, but it's rare. Don't count on that. Only take on those types of stories and situations if you can see the car in person. see the title in person, all those things. Never take anybody's face value word for it when it comes to online listings for cars. Another thing you should be aware of is every car has a story, right? Most people will just say, it's been a great car, runs great, it's got cold AC, everything's great with the car. Okay, maybe it is, but you should also never just assume that. Most people sell cars for a reason. Now, if you're looking at a newer car, let's say the car is 10 years old, pretty good chance maybe they just upgraded, okay? Maybe they're just going to something else, but that doesn't mean you should always count on that. Always be ready to get there and walk away from the car. Don't fall in love with it. I always recommend bring a friend with you. Bring your close friend, your somebody who knows a little bit about cars, or at least knows a little bit about how to talk you out of a bad deal. This is important because when you go into a car situation, you've been looking online for weeks and you finally found this car and you're in love with it, and you go and see it, there might be some glaringly obvious things that your friend will pick up on, and maybe you are ignoring it because you want the car and you're in love with the car. Well, your friend will be like, listen, I don't think this is a good deal. Trust your friend's instinct on those. I've seen a lot of people get burned by not taking a friend with them, falling in love with a car, and then a week later, oh, I didn't get a good car. It happens. It happens to all of us, and it will likely happen to somebody you know. Hopefully not you, though. The last thing we want to talk about when it comes to buying a car online and some immediate things you should do before you even go to look at a car is pricing, right? Pricing can be all over the spectrum on used cars, even cars of the same make and model. What's important to realize here is there are such things as low mileage, what they call like cream puffs, right? Grandma's car, grandma's Altima. That car may be very nice and in great condition. It may be worth more than market value for the car. But you also have the car that's been driven around by, 17-year-old Chad and driven into about 15 curbs, had some monster stickers put on it and it's a real bad rattle can job, and has no stereo now because, well, it did something, I took it out, my friend was going to put in a new one, but it never happened. Those cars are on the lower end of the spectrum, and then there's every single car in between, right? High cars, low cars, regular cars, and all that kind of stuff. You want to shoot, in my opinion, right down the center. You don't really want to go look for the cream puff car unless you can afford it and it's a car you really, really want. Now, if you've managed to find the cream puff car and you're just like, this is a great deal, it's a low mileage car, those kinds of things, be careful. A car that's older and low mileage could have problems too. I have an Oldsmobile Cutlass. It was a 1999, had 60,000 miles on it. I bought the car in 2016. I had nothing but problems with that car. Why? Because it sat for so long. It had so much deterioration in rubber parts and plastic parts and things, and the engine wasn't right because it had been sitting. All the seals had dried up. So the first time I went to start it, it immediately started to leak. Older cars that have low mileage can be just as troublesome as high mileage older cars. So you want that middle ground, right? The rule of thumb here, 10,000 miles per year is about the average that most people drive. Now in the state of California, it's a lot higher than that, realistically. I would account for more like 15 to 20. Some people drive even more than that. I'm one of those people. I drive close to 40,000 miles a year. So just some quick reference things to try to think about before you even go and look at the car in person. Now, let's introduce our 3 candidates of cars that were fresh off the market that I scooped up to bring here for you guys so you guys could see some cars across the different markets and things to try to hunt down a replacement that fits kind of the Toyota Corolla build, right? We're looking for something that's cheap, reliable, and is ultimately an easy A to B automobile. Here we have our first candidate, a 2016 Nissan Versa. So, you want something that's like a Corolla, but you don't want to pay Corolla premiums? Aha, here's your car. But remember, we talked about doing the preliminary search, right? Understanding what these cars are all about before you get to the driveway. Well, we have our simulated driveway, we have our car, so we had to have done our research, right? Nissan Versas have a couple of problems. First off, their automatic transmissions have some warranty issues and they don't last very long. Being a CVT, Nissan kind of is notorious for that. There's even class action lawsuits against them for their CVT transmissions. So, how do we solve that problem with this car? Well, I'm already here, right? So I must have solved that problem somehow. This car is a stick shift. There we go. So we don't have to worry about the big problem with these cars, which is the automatic transmissions. So when you first get to the driveway and you see the car, now we're going to see what it's like to do that. So we have the car here. Let's make a quick walk around, take some mental notes about what we see. Well, it's very dirty. It has some pine needles and stuff coming out of it. Pretty good indications maybe it's been parked for a while. Okay, why would somebody park such a new car? Interesting. So, let's see. Well, the key looks like somebody tried to break into this car. Maybe the door locks may not work on this car. Okay, its tires look good. Now that's a key indication here. Good tires can make or break a deal on a car. See, a set of tires like this doesn't cost a lot of money, but you can look at them right here and see that they have plenty of tread, nice even wear pattern. These tires are good to go. You don't have any dry cracking or anything like that. Now, a set of tires for this car may set you back $300 or $400. Therefore, you need to realize that if the tires are no good, it may cost you $300 or $400 to replace them. You should negotiate that in the deal. What do bad tires look like? Well, they look like what my Mazda looks like. You see, there's no tread left here at all. There's nothing here for the tire to use. Here you have these tread wear bars, they're all the way down. Using those as an indicator, we can come look at the tread wear bars on this tire. Let's see, here they are right here. You see how far deep into the groove they are? All the way down there. These tires have plenty of life left in them. Well, that's a good mark for the car. Okay, let's see what else we can find. Oh, immediately here's a problem, right? Looks like this taillight's had some water intrusion, probably has a seal failure. Matter of fact, the water's been in there so long it's starting to grow things inside of it. That means we're going to have problems with this light socket. We may have weird grounds now. It may cause all kinds of weird problems. Something to be wary of. The license plate can give you a lot of more information than you think. We already talked about looking it up, but this is an out-of-state tag. Okay, well that means a couple of things for us here. It means one, we're not going to have the back fees problem we talked about because it's not from here. But that may mean this car may not pass smog here. Something to think about. So we look here, tag is 2021 of February. Well, it's currently late fall in 2023, which means just as we saw from the pine needles, this car's been parked up for a little while. Interesting. Have a little bit of curb rash here, that's nothing to worry about. More dirt and pine needles, okay, not too bad. Now this is about the time where if you haven't gotten a hold of the owner of the car, you're going to want to get the owner of the car out, so that way you guys can go through the car together. So when you finally get the keys to the car, first thing you want to do is get in the car, verify the mileage that they told you. You get in, you get your key, you turn the key on, look at the odometer. This one has 64,000 miles. Okay, interesting. So with that, if the owner told us that the car had 64,000 or maybe 70,000 or 65, okay, we're on track here. But if he told you it had 20,000 miles and only has 64,000 now, oh well, you already are dealing with a shady character. Next thing you want to do while you're in the inside, and this car has a dark interior, so it's a little harder to find or a little harder to see as far as the camera is concerned, but take a look around. You see this car is very dirty. There's stuff hanging out everywhere, dirt, all that kind of stuff, just a bunch of garbage. It's clear that the person that had the car before us didn't care too much about the interior and what it looked like. Okay, so that door's locked, so let's go to unlock it. This particular car, being a cheaper car, doesn't have power door locks. So we'll have to do the old 90s reach around and open the door from the inside somehow. It's not my car, so there it is. Well, I mean, it is my car now, I guess, but there we go. Open it up, take a look in the back seats. Look for rips, tears, stains, things like that. Give a key indicator what the car's life is like. This one, like we noticed already, is very dirty. There's lots of mail hanging out everywhere. It's just a mess in here. Okay, that gives us some more things to know about the car. Let's look into the trunk. Now the trunk may hide some wonderful information. Opening the trunk, first thing you're going to want to do is look at the underside of the trunk. Make sure this is all the same color as the car that this trunk matches. Some Japanese cars will actually put the VIN numbers here, which you can verify that this part came with the car when it was built. The next thing you're going to want to do is go ahead and lift up these carpets. Get under there. Take a look around. See how the metal in here looks nice and clean? Doesn't look bent or misshapen. All the welds or the seam putty over there looks like it's intact in all one color. Doesn't look bulgy or deformed in any way. It's a pretty good indication that this car has never been in a rear end accident. That's a good sign. Also, while you're in here, feel around. Feel if things feel wet or anything like that. Make sure this trunk doesn't have any seal failure. As you can see, these seals are dirty, but they seem to be doing their job. It's nice and dry in there. Now for the all-important part. Checking to make sure that the engine is good. So you're going to want, of course, pop your hood. walk around. And this is where having a friend comes in handy, because eventually you're going to want to start this engine up, and you're going to want to have him do it because you want to stand around and see what the engine does. And as all people have to do when they're shopping for a car, is have to find somebody else's hood latch. Okay, allow me to pop this up really quick. Okay, now that we have our hood open, we can see that this in particular engine is quite dirty. This is not a very good sign for us here. How many of y'all just checked your phone? Okay, as you can see here, we've got some mouse and rat droppings all over the engine. Now we need to know to look for wires being chewed up or eaten on. So look, we've got some wires here. Those all look good. Battery looks good. No corrosion or anything like that. Yeah, other than the engine being dirty, it looks okay, at least first glance. All the components seem like they're here. We don't see any large leaks or anything like that. Everything looks to be okay. Look around, I got some spider webs and things, but that's okay. If you can see the engine belts, that's a good plus. Flip them over if you can. Kind of look around them and see if they look dry, cracked, or brittle, or anything like that. You can see, based on this engine, it's kind of hard to see the belts. So we're not going to be able to do that too well. Okay, well now that we have that, what you're going to want to do is have your friend start the engine. Watch over it, look for shakes and things like that. So have your friend start up the car. I guess I have to press the clutch down. Okay, car seems to start up okay. I don't hear any weird rattles or anything like that. And as the car's sitting here running, when you first have your friend start it up, you're going to want to check outside. Look by the tailpipe. Look for white smoke, blue smoke, any kind of weird things coming out of the tailpipe. This one's tailpipe's way tucked down low. Looks like it's just a little bit of white smoke coming out of there. That's nothing to be worried about. That's not actually smoke at all. That's just condensation from the engine. As the engine has combustion, little bits of hydrogen and oxygen combine to make water, which often gets hot in the exhaust and will burn off as steam. Not a big issue. No big white smoke, no big blue smoke. Okay, not too bad. Car started up right away, didn't have a slow crank or a failure to start or anything like that. Okay, sounds okay. It's a little ticky, but that's just kind of how these engines sound. Very nice. So, another thing you're going to want to do while you're up here in the engine, you're going to want to check your oil, check your transmission fluid, check your coolant levels, all those kinds of information that's important for you to know. Why do you want to do all that? Well, you want to do all that because if you have to drive this thing home, you need to know if it's safe to do so and you're not going to hurt the engine. The other thing to note is underneath of the car. Let's look under here. Look for leaks, especially if the car's been parked for at least a couple of hours. Look for leaks down here. Look underneath there. Look all the way up there. Look for anything that looks wet. Look for anything that's dripping. That's some good stuff to know, because if it has an engine leak, it's something you're going to have to fix later. Also look at the rockers, which is this piece of metal here. Look for rust. Look for holes. Look for anything that looks out of place. This is nice and straight and even, and it's very good. Now, if you have rust and stuff, sometimes it's very obvious. Sometimes you have rust and you're looking right at it, like this old truck. And it's pretty hard to miss that at a curb, right? But if you look underneath of the truck, if that cab corner wasn't all eaten out like that, you may look underneath of the truck here and note that there's far more rust underneath. That's not so easily seen from the curb. This car doesn't seem to have any rust, doesn't seem to have any leaks. Window tint doesn't seem to be bubbling either. So aside from it needing a very good detail and some other things, at least at surface level, this car's pretty decent. Next thing you want to do is get in and check all the car's features. Now, if you're looking at, say, a highly optioned Mercedes, this could take you a while. But this here, well, it's just an old Nissan, so it shouldn't take us too long. What we'll do is we'll get in here, turn the key back on, start up the engine. Very nice. Go ahead and check and make sure your AC works. Turn those on, turn that to cold. Make sure the AC light's on. Give yourself a feel. Let's get some more speed out of that. Oh, it looks like it's not facing towards me. Turn it towards you. Oh yeah, that's cold right away. Very good. Now I don't want to make you guys listen to wind, so we're going to turn that back off. Check to make sure the stereo works. Oh yes, that works. Very good. Now you're going to want to leave this off for the remainder of this experience, because if the car makes any weird noises, you're going to want to know about it. Next thing you want to do, check your mirrors. If it has power mirrors, make sure all the power adjustments work. Okay, yeah, that's working. Left, right, up, down. Very good. Now the other side, so I tangle myself in my own cables. There we go. Okay. Oh, got to flip the switch over. There we go. Right, left, up, down. Nice. Now this car is not equipped with power windows. It has the old, manual rolly job here. So I don't really have to go through and check all the windows. But that's something you should check if the car you're looking at does have power windows. Okay, what else does this car have? Really not much. There's not much to this particular car. It has a couple of radio controls and things. It has some buttons on this for the stereo on the steering wheel. But at this point, it'd be about the time that you just go through and kind of flip on some lights and stuff. Oh, okay, yeah, that one works. Things like that. And then you're going to have your friends stand outside and you're going to have them check all the lights. Make sure all the blinkers work. Make sure your brights and stuff work. Check your brake lights, things like that. So remember, we saw the water intrusion on that taillight. Let's see if it's affected the taillight in any way. Okay, so it looks like this is probably the indicator. This is the running bulb. So this is more likely than not the reverse bulb or a blinker. So left blinker on. I have to turn the engine to off so I don't run myself over. Reverse. Okay, so the reverse light is on. It's functioning just okay, even though there's water in there. Okay, so we're gonna have to just replace the tail light, clean up the socket, not a big deal. Check your license plate lights. Very good. Okay, so this car is looking pretty decent. Looks like a pretty okay little car. Pretty low mileage, 64,000. Everything seems to work. It's upset that I left the lights on. No check engine lights, no ABS lights, no airbag lights, anything like that. Those are things to look for as well. If you have a pocket scanner or if you're test driving a car, you can get to an AutoZone, they'll do it for free. If it's got a check engine light, go ahead and put that on there. If you do have a pocket scanner, look to see if you can run the diagnostic tests. So when a car has had a battery disconnected, it clears all the tests that the computer runs for the evaporative emission system, and it takes a couple of drive cycles to reset those. So if a non-scrupulous, or how should I put this? If a seller is being less than truthful with you, he may reset the battery and have the car drive around okay for a day or two, and then as soon as you buy it and you come home with it and you're happy, check engine light comes on. So if you have a scanner and you're able to check those, make sure that it's run and passed all those tests for the evaporative emission system. That'll save you from problems later. Okay, so the next step would be the test drive, which we're not going to do on camera just because it's such a pain to try to videotape a test drive on camera, and I have 3 of these to do. So with that, you would test drive it, make sure it steers okay. Go down the road and test the brakes, of course, make sure it's driving okay. The next thing you want to do is check the alignment. You do that by going in a straight line about 25 to 30 miles an hour. Let go of the wheel and let go of the gas. Do not hit the brake. If the car is veering left or right, you might have an alignment issue. If it's going down the road relatively straight, I mean, it's going to teeter a little bit just by the nature of the car, then you're okay. It seems like it's got a pretty decent alignment. Make sure the steering wheel's straight going down the road as well. Next thing you want to do is check things like the wipers and, use the spray bottle, use the sprayer, spray water on your windshield and make sure that works while you're driving along. Now this car would give itself away right away because it has bad wiper blades. See? No good. So doing that would give me right away that this car's wiper blades are shot. Oh, well, hard to argue with a seller over a couple $1 wiper blades, but it's something that you as a buyer need to be aware of. And as you're driving along, don't turn the radio on, listen to the engine. If it's automatic, listen to the transmission. If it's a stick, feel the clutch. How's the clutch feel? Does it feel strong? Does it feel like it's going to slip a little bit? Does it feel weak on the pedal? All those kinds of things. Now, as someone who's been driving a car before, those are just like, duh, right? You just drive the car like you would normally, and the things that are bad with the car will give themselves up right away. And the things that are okay with the car, you'll know. But for a new person that's new to buying a car, and maybe has only bought new cars and they're trying to find a used car for a friend or a daughter or a son or something like that, here's some quick things to look for when you're driving a used car around that may be high mileage. You want to listen to squeaks, rattles in the suspension, right? Because this car is going to have pretty good suspension. It's a pretty new car. So for a good chance it's not going to make any squeaks, creaks, rattles. The engine, the transmission, you're going to make sure that all the car's drivability is there. It steers right, it brakes right. all that kind of stuff. Once you have all that and you're pretty familiar with the way the car drives and you're pretty happy with it, and in the case of this car, everything else seems to check out. We have a few things to do: wiper blades, a tail light housing, an oil change probably. You know, some simple stuff. Okay, you could do all that and at the end of the day have a really good little car. But what does a car like this go for? Well, this car is probably in the market for about $6,000 to $8,000 in today's market at the end of 2023, and that's about what I would expect to pay for a car of this current situation where it's sitting right now. If I was a seller, I of course would never show it like this. I would clean it up, make it look like a brand new penny, and probably ask a little bit more than that for it, especially because it's a low mileage car. So that's candidate number 1. What's the next candidate? Well, let's get right into that right now. Allow me to introduce you to candidate number 2. So, and some of you in the last video maybe have been saying to yourself, Alex, I thought you were talking about cheap cars, not cars that are $6,000 to $8,000. That's a lot of money. I feel you. Now allow me to introduce you to this tasty little Skittle, which some regular viewers of my channel may recognize as being parked usually over there in the background shots of most of my videos. This here is a 2005 Dodge Neon. Now, these cars have, let's say, a questionable history as far as reliability and things, so this is probably not the greatest candidate, unless you want to save a few bucks. What does a car like this run? Anywhere from $2,000 to about $4,000. This one is, I'm going to go ahead and give away a little bit, is a pretty nice car as far as Dodge Neons go, and I paid $4,000 for this car. Now, I don't recommend spending $4,000 on a Dodge Neon, but this one's in pretty decent shape, and I really just kind of fell in love with it. So again, bring your friends with you. Don't fall in love with a car. I didn't get burned on this one, but I easily could have. Now, all the things we talked about in the Versa, you're going to want to do with these cheaper cars too. Go ahead, walk around, do all the stuff we did. Check all the things inside the interior. Make sure everything works. Air conditioners, stereos, power windows and door locks, lights. Check the engine, all those kinds of things. Check the tires, look for rust, look for leaks, all those kinds of stuff. Now, this car has already given us a couple of weird stuff, right? If this car was for sale and it didn't belong to me and I didn't already know its history. Okay, so we have some faded headlights. Pretty common for cars in this price bracket. Nothing to worry about there as long as the headlights work. Uh-oh, questionable. What's that? That's a temporary registration. That means if the car's for sale right now, the current owner may not have had it that long. Uh-oh, why would they want to get rid of a car so quickly? And what's this we have here? Ah, interesting. What is that? Well, that's a Donut Media air freshener. Well, why is that interesting? Well, who would put that in their car? Well, somebody who probably thrashes the poor thing. So, that's not necessarily the case, but, you know, good possibility that someone who watches Donut Media and has a little stick shift car like this may be ragging it to death. So, like we talked about, pop in the trunk, look in the carpets, and make sure you look for accident damage in the rear. Make sure you look for accident damage in the sides by looking at those seals like we talked about. Make sure everything's good, nice and straight. Of course, you're going to go ahead and pop the hood. Now, considering I do currently, or I should say, I currently kind of own all of them, but this car I've at least had for a little while, so the hood prop's not going to give me as much problems. Okay, so we have our little Dodge Neon engine here. Now, I can tell you when I bought this car, I looked underneath of it and I knew right away that it was leaking. Because as you can look underneath it here, you can see that the engine is a little dirty there, and it's cleaned up because I cleaned it up trying to find out the source of the leak, but it was much worse when I first looked at it. Dead giveaway that this car has an engine oil leak. Now, like we talked about the Nissan, you're going to want to check all your stuff, power steering fluid, belts, all those kinds of things. And in this case, we can kind of see the belts. And you see these little lines and things here. It's a pretty good indication that this belt's pretty worn out. It's probably time to replace it. Okay, so one thing I do want to demonstrate with this car is when I talked to the seller of this car, I asked him, of course, as I usually do, hey, how's the car drive? Is there anything wrong with it? Is there anything I need to know about? And he told me, well, it drives great. AC works, but it's a little shaky. A little shaky, I say. Is it shaky all the time, or it's only shaky at speed, or what does that a little shaky mean? It says it's shaky all the time. Okay, well, if it was a little shaky at speed, that's some stuff to be worried about, right? Could be tires unbalanced, could be bad tires, could be mismatched wheels and tire combinations, could be a suspension issue, could be ball joints and things. So let's say you question that kind of stuff. Okay, so the first thing you're gonna wanna do is come over here, just kind of shake the wheels, the front wheels back and forth. Feel if they're loose. What you don't want is to hit it, it feels just slightly loose and you hear tuk, 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 tuk. that's bad. That means you probably have a ball joint problem. So these are nice and solid. Very good. Once you've done that on both sides, you're going to want to come around to the wheel, kind of just give it a left-right motion, real soft. If you feel a knocking in the wheel, also could be a ball joint problem. Okay, so this thing seems to pass all that. So what's the shakiness? Well, we'll have to start it to find out, right? So we have our keys. Get into the car, go ahead and start it up. Oh, I feel it. So, GoPro has pretty good stabilization in their cameras, so it's going to be hard to demonstrate for you guys. That's about the only thing I do like about GoPros. But if I place you guys up here, and I just leave you loose like that, hopefully, actually I think the steering wheel might work a little better. It should, hopefully, show you what I'm talking about. And as you rev the engine, the shakiness gets smoother and then rougher and then smoother and then rougher. Interesting. But what does that mean for us? It could mean a couple of things. If the car has a check engine light on, you know automatically that the car is probably experiencing engine misfires. That could be a whole different host of different things that it could be, and that may be something that makes you walk away from that car. Well, this car seems to run okay. It doesn't have a check engine light or anything. Let's say in my case, like I did, and when I bought it, I put the scanner on it and made sure it run all its tests and everything was fine. Well, what does that mean then? It's probably engine mounts. So in this case, we can see the engine mounts right on top on this car. And if you look right in there, you can see it's a little cracked up. It's a little deteriorated. And if the top one's like that, likely the bottom one is worse. And that is likely the cause of the shaking engine on this particular little car. Okay, well, if that's something you're willing to tackle, it may be a good way to get a good deal on the car, because most people are going to drive it and it's going to shake about and they're going to be like, wow, why would I want this thing? It shakes like a chihuahua. So, yeah, you might be able to get a couple bucks off of that. And of course, you're going to walk around like we talked about and just make sure there isn't anything else you can get a couple of dollars off for, right? It's all about making a deal when you're talking about a car in this price bracket. Let's see, we got some ripped seats. Oh man, we could talk about that a little bit. And this one particularly for a Dodge Neon is relatively high mileage, 188,888 is how many miles are currently on this car. That's pretty high mileage for a Dodge Neon. You could even just pull the old, like, man, I've never seen a Dodge Neon with over 200K before, so how am I going to know this car is even going to make it? Things like that. You could play the game, right? Be the shrewd negotiator. But this is essentially what the kind of car you could look at, that you could look for and find in the $2,000 to $4,000 range, right? It doesn't have to be a Dodge Neon. There's lots of cars like this in this price range. You could even go for like a Honda Accord, or even go really off the beaten path, right? Even a Neon's kind of off the beaten path, but you could go for like, say, a Saturn or something like that. You know, find something a little weird, a little strange. Maybe you'll be able to find a good deal there. Okay, so with that, let's look at our very last candidate. We went from 8 to 6. Let's go, and we went from 4 to 2. Let's look at like practically free to like max of $2,000 and see what kind of car we can get for that. And now for our last candidate, let's call it a couple $100s to $2,000. Now, let me just preface this as I have the real life buying experience of this car, which is a 1994 Jeep Grand Cherokee. It's on my channel. Check it out to see what the real life situation was like for me buying that car. I did buy it sight unseen. I basically only had a couple of pictures to go off of, and I ended up with this lovely pile of crap. So, now I did have a bumper on it at that time. I took the bumper off to fix a few things. But anyway, so let's say Craigslist Jeep Grand Cherokee. It's got 2 pictures, none of them are at the front end, I can tell you that right now. $850, I need it gone by Thursday. And you come up and, well, there it is. So, let's do the walk around like we did, right? Well, it's missing bumpers, there's stuff hanging off of it. Oh, what do we have here? Oh, that's an indication that this car, it was either came from a junkyard or an auction or something along the lines where somebody had to identify it by some means, which means the previous owner was probably flipping it for something. And it does seem to have some good tires on it. Seems like the paintwork and bodywork seems okay, and it's a little rough, but it is what it is, right? So we go around and do our regular checks, and the only thing that really points out at us is there is pine needles, indicating again that the car has probably been parked for a while. We have some interesting things going on with this fender over here, which may be an indication that this car has had some body damage, or maybe just somebody punched it real hard, who knows. But it's got a dent. Now I can tell you in this case, it's because this door, when it opens, all the hinges are rusted and broken off, and it bends the fender. I know that because I've already opened that door, and I don't really feel like trying to do it on camera. The little song and dance I have to get that door back on. But if you were here looking around the car, of course, the opening all the doors would be something you would do, and you would notice immediately that that door is basically not even attached to the truck. So as we start to look around and we get inside, and well, $850 you say, huh? It's pretty rough in here. A lot of stuff all over the place. The owner's got stuff crammed all in it. There's stuff dangling from the ceiling. These are all whippy and woppy. There's stuff missing off of it. Okay, well, it is what it is. How many miles has this old jalopy got? Well, 214,000 miles. I guess it's kind of hard to say anything about a car in this kind of condition. So next thing we're going to want to do is, of course, get those lovely keys from the owner, right? So you're going to get the keys. After a lovely jump cut, we have the key. Okay, so we get in here, and just like I did when I first got this jalopy, I put the key in, and I go to start the engine, and nothing. No lights, nothing. So in this situation where you try to start the car and no lights are coming on, nothing seems to be working, everything seems dead, more likely than not, the car has some kind of a battery issue. Could be a dead battery, could be a draining battery, maybe the battery cables are in poor shape, things like that. So let's go ahead and go and mess with the battery now. Okay, so what we have here is a car that has a draining battery. Now we've got a fresh battery inside of it. Okay, now while I was in here, I was able to look around and make sure the leaks and the belts and all the things we previously talked about. One thing I forgot to mention is, of course, you want to check these rails, make sure they're nice and straight, they're not discolored. All these are essentially the same type, same color, and don't look like they have a lot of tool marks on them, because that's an indication the vehicle maybe have been in a front end collision. Okay, so we have all that. Let's see if it'll start now. Oh, we have some lights. There's some life in here. Okay, well, hard starter. Pretty good indication that this vehicle has some kind of big problems, right? So, well, it's $850. Do you still want it? Well, let's say it does start right away. Now, of course, you want to go through all the things we talked about, checking your power windows and door locks, making sure all the transmission shift's okay, if it can even go down the road, if it's even legal to drive a vehicle this cheap down the road, if it's in decent enough condition. And of course, you want to look at things like we talked about with the tags, right? So this one's November of 23. That indicates to me that even though this car is a big old pile, it'll probably pass them on, because at least it did 2 years ago. And that does not going to have any back fees, because all the tags and things are up to date. At that point, it's up to you whether to make a decision whether you want to buy a car this cheap or not. Now, a couple of things to consider here. I'm going to go ahead and disconnect the battery so it doesn't drain down. A couple of things to consider here when looking at buying used cars, right? What are some cheat codes to this process? Well, a couple of them. If you're looking for a car that's cheap, but you want a good car, and you don't want to spend a lot of money doing it, I recommend buying something ugly, something people don't necessarily think is a good looking car. They're usually cheaper because there's less demand for them. They might still be good cars. Think like, what would Grandpa drive, right? Buicks, Cadillacs, things like that. You may be able to find good deals on cars like that because they're just not that desirable as far as, younger generations are concerned. So there might be some deals to be found there. You might also look at cars that are slightly older but still reliable. Toyota Corollas, Honda Civics, things like that that are 20 years old, 25 years old, things like that. I mean, that little Neon out there is nearing 20 years old itself. So that's a couple other cheat codes you could look at. Look for cars with maybe cars that have high mileage but have service records to back up that they've been reasonably serviced. And as long as everything checks out, yeah, sure, the odometer's got some big numbers on it, but that doesn't necessarily mean anything negative about the car. I'm going to make a few quick remarks about sellers before we wrap up the end of the video. Now, the advice I'm about to say doesn't really go for people that are veterans in the used car market and things like that. For every single thing I'm about to tell you, there's some story or some situation where it doesn't necessarily apply. But I'm going to say this for the people that are just trying to get a good car, not spend a lot of money, and not get hosed on the deal. Some things that sellers do are dead giveaways that you should walk away from the deal right away. Number one, being real cagey. When can you get here? I only can see you on Thursday between this time and this time. Da-da-da-da-da. If they're not really open to work with you on scheduling stuff, it may not be worth the the problem of going to see the car, because once you get there, they're going to be doing the same thing. When can you get it? It's just too much. Okay. During the conversation, when you're asking them about questions about the car in general, if they're always have an excuse, right, for everything, like, oh, does the air conditioner work? Well, and it works on this day, and you got to top it off, and all these kinds of things, right? Or, you know, does it leak anything? Well, you know, it leaked some stuff, and then I put some stop, and all those kinds of excuses, it's not worth it. Just, you already know that everything, when you get to go see the car that's wrong with it, they're gonna have a million excuses. Just walk away. It's not worth it. Just walk away. If the car has a weird history, like the title's not in their name, or it's my sister's car, or whatever, you might be able to work with that. Just make sure the registered owner is there and can sign the title, and make sure the title is present in view before you give anybody money for anything. Do not take keys, title don't take the keys in the car and give them cash without seeing paper title signed in your hand before you do so. Typically, in my experience, you exchange the title and the cash at the same time so that the person can sign the title, the other person can count the cash. That's how that deal typically works. The last thing you want to know about individual sellers and why someone might be a little too shaky, you might want to walk away from a deal, right, is if they give you a lot of excuses towards whether or not the car's price is negotiable, or the price of the car in general. Okay, if they say a price online, then that should be the price. Okay, now the whole like texting back and forth, you know, a car's $2,000 and you shoot them $1,200. Okay, that's okay. First of all, don't do that. Nobody likes that move. Okay, that's a cheap move. Don't do that. Nobody likes that. If you want to ask if they'll take $1,200 for the car, introduce yourself, tell them that you're interested in driving the car, establish a time to see it, and tell them, I would like to spend $1,200 on this car. Would you be willing to accept $1,200? Don't just type 1200 and send. That's rude. Nobody likes that. Okay. Now, if the person that you're trying to buy the car from is weird about the price, and they're saying this or that, or they're changing the scale up and down a lot, or they're even just saying like, if you could bring me $1,500 cash today, it's yours. That kind of stuff sometimes is a deal. Okay, sometimes people are hard up for money. It's happened. I've bought cars like that. It can happen. But for the average person, just be weary. That kind of talk is like, something's wrong, right? They need the money for something. Now, it could be legitimate reasons. They may need that cash to pay the mortgage today, and this car is worth the money and they're trying to cash out. That's fine. You might get a great deal on a car. That could work out for you. Or they're not really supposed to be selling this car, and they have some legal right to the car, or maybe they don't and they have a title and they're trying to get it out of here before so-and-so gets home and sees it's gone. And once you have the title and stuff, I mean, technically it's your car, but there could be legal repercussions down the road. So just don't mess with it. Make sure that make sure that the seller is straightforward with you, communicates openly and fairly, is willing to work with you on everything, and doesn't make a lot of excuses for the car, the title, the price, or anything like that. And you should have a wonderful experience with your seller and you as the buyer. And if you are a seller, make sure that you, of course, do the same in return. Make sure you speak openly, clearly, negotiate the price of the car on the phone. If you're going to do that, make sure you, of course, being fair and polite about it. And that's pretty much all I have to say between the buyer and the seller. The part of the deal that the car in itself is not necessarily an important aspect. And that's pretty much some ins and outs of some real basic stuff to look for to really get into looking at a used car, just real quick and dirty. Of course, you could get really in the weeds. You could talk about so many other things to look for, so many other things to check. Each individual model has extra stuff you could look at. But that's really just the real basics of trying to look at a car quick and in a hurry in somebody's driveway who's trying to get out of there with his $850 or whatever the price of the car is. So hopefully that was helpful to some of you, or just an interesting walk down 3 of my jalopies. Either way, I hope that you guys enjoyed the video. I can't wait to catch you next time when we're actually working on stuff instead of me just pulling a bunch of junk out of the weeds. So that way you guys can look at why I waste all my money. All right. Have a good one, guys. I'll see you next time.